You know that the center offers world-class fertility care, but did you also know that we have a highly regarded research division as well? That's what we're talking about today on Lunchtime Live with the center. Research Director Dr. Evelyn Neuber and Research Manager Scott Yohe are here to talk about this and how the center has contributed to some exciting findings that have furthered the treatment of infertility. Dr. Neuber and Scott, welcome.
Thank you.
So what type of research do we conduct? What do you mean by research?
Yes, well, we're very excited about the research department. So there's really three different types of research that we're involved in. The first one is sort of collaborative research, that a company approaches us and they're looking for a proof of concept, and we're one of the sites that helps them with that, sort of developing a product. The other one is it's called a phase 3 clinical trial, which is really where we're testing a drug. So we just finished a phase 3 clinical trial with Ferring Pharmaceuticals. They had a new formulation of Menopur. Instead of the powder form, they wanted to make it a liquid. So we were one of the test sites that was involved with that in terms of recruiting the patients and helping them with that study. And the third part, which is also exciting, is what's called investigator-initiated studies, which is where one of our doctors or the fellows here, because we're an academic affiliation of UConn, or the lab director has an idea to how to improve something that's happening in the IVF clinic. So we develop the idea, we do the protocols and all that. So that's very exciting. It's sort of driven from us here.
Mm-hmm. So like the one with Ferring, is that one, when it's done, do we find out the results and what if that drug is beneficial and can be used going forward?
That's a common question that a lot of the patients have before participating in some of the trials. And to a certain extent, yes, there are results that are known. For instance, we can give them information about the ultrasound scans or the blood work that's done during the testing. But most of the trials that we do, the larger trials, are what are called double-blind studies, meaning that we don't know what type of medication the patient may be on. Ferring doesn't know the medication that the patient is on. Once all of the information is collected, then the study is what's called unblinded. And at that point, the information particular to a patient would be known. However, that is not fed back to the patient the majority of the time. So they don't receive individual results from participation, but during the cycle, they will receive information about the exam.
Right. And the studies then will be released because they're looking for FDA approval. So you will find the results after they have FDA approval, whether it's been accepted or not. So ultimately the patients find out.
But do the patients know if they have been double blinded, or if they receive the placebo, if I'm saying this correctly?
The study itself is double blinded. So the individual patients are not.
Okay.
For those studies that use a placebo, no, the patient does not know specifically that they were on the placebo. They can imply that they may have been on the placebo if they're not getting a good response from the medication, but it's never known specifically whether or not a patient was on a placebo.
Okay. So you talked about the types. What are some of the current studies that we are doing?
As Evelyn mentioned, there are really three large headers for studies. One of them is collaborative or proof of concept. And we have participated and are participating in many of those types of studies. We currently have a study collaborating with UCSF called the Aspire study. And any patient can participate in the Aspire study. And that is particularly looking at the potential effects that may have occurred during COVID. That's a big topic of interest to know whether or not there are any effects. And UCSF is collecting that data from sites across the country. So that's a study that we are involved with.
Right. Pregnancy and during pregnancy, the pregnancy part of luckily after they get pregnant from here.
Right.
So.
Right.
Okay.
We have another study called an uninterrupted culture study that we're doing here. During development of embryos, they're cultured or maturing. And it's common to look at those embryos several times during the maturation process. So one of the studies that we're doing is comparing if we don't interrupt the embryos during their maturation, is that different than if you do look at them every day? So that's another study that's going on here. We just completed a study with a company called BioIncept, where we looked at the spent media. As the embryos are developing, they develop in a media culture, which is generally discarded. But there may be information in that media which would be helpful for selection of embryo for transplantation, or transfer. So we just completed that study, and we don't yet know the results of that. That is still ongoing to get that. We have another study with a company called Cellmatics, and they are looking at genetic components that may influence pregnancy or influence parts of a woman's IVF cycle. And that involves giving a small sample of blood, and then that is analyzed at Cellmatics. So that is currently ongoing. There's another study that we just started called Cradle Genomics, and that is collecting cervical fluid, which is then analyzed for DNA. The hope of that study is to eliminate invasive procedures such as amniocentesis. So that is the goal of that study. And then we're just starting a new study. Every study that we've talked about so far are for the female. But as we know, the male also can influence whether or not there's a successful pregnancy. So one of the things that happens very commonly is a semen analysis. And the semen analysis generally requires that the man come in and produce a sample, which is then analyzed. So we're working with a company called Bastion Health on a home semen analysis kit. So that's something that we're just starting as well. So those are the collaborative or the proof of concept studies. The phase 3 clinical studies, which Evelyn mentioned, one of which was Clara. We worked with Ferring Pharmaceuticals. Those were both drug-related trials, clinical trials. Those have both completed from a standpoint of enrollment, but we're now doing follow-up for those studies. And then the third study was an initiated or investigator-initiated study. And we have a study going on called the Zymote study, and that's comparing sperm preparation using a standard centrifuge method versus a device called a microfluidics device. So those are some of the studies that we have going on.
So for the ones that are not national, how do you determine or who determines what's going to be studied and researched?
Right. So like Scott was saying too, so Ferring Pharmaceutical approached us to be one of the multi-center studies. So they approached us and we worked with them to make sure that it fits in with what we're doing here at CAR's overall clinical care, that it doesn't interrupt clinical care, but it sort of is a real value add to the clinical care. So that's one way that we're approached for studies. And the investigator-initiated studies is really somebody comes up with an idea that they think would ultimately improve the overall outcomes of infertility. So Allison Bartolucci, our lab director, came up with the uninterrupted culture study. So that was an idea that she had, that she really thinks, or she was really trying to determine if it was better to look at the embryos every single day or to leave them in the culture, especially since we now do day 5 transfers. That's more feasible right now.
So why is all of this important? Why is research important?
Well, I think it's a real value add to both to the patients and to the staff. One of the nice things we feel with the research is that it's not just a research office. It really involves everybody here at the center, from the nurses to the doctors to the support staff, that they really can get involved and really feel like we're working towards better outcomes at the end or better patient care overall. So we think it's a real addition to a clinic, not just a separate program that somebody has a crazy idea, some crazy scientist has an idea, but really that it is an enhancement to the clinical care ultimately for all the patients.
And another thing that's happened is during our participation in some of these studies, we were introduced to protocols that were slightly different than what we would normally do here. And as it turns out, there may have been some beneficial factors in that new method that can be implemented in our standard procedure. So being exposed to new concepts, new information is always beneficial.
Yes, to the patients especially, right?
Yes.
How can the patients get involved? So you're looking for participants. How would a patient know about any of these studies aside from this?
Yes, great question. So a lot of the studies are listed on a website called clinicaltrials.gov.
Okay.
And we also have a lot of them listed on our website. So clinicaltrials.gov is sort of a national database for studies. More specifically, the studies all the studies that we're conducting here at the center are on the website. But really the main way to find out about current studies is to talk to your doctor. So when you're meeting with your doctor, to talk to them, say that you're interested, that you'd like to hear more about various studies, and then we can provide all that information, because they'll know the inclusion-exclusion criteria. They'll see if it makes, if it's beneficial to the patients individually. So it's very personalized, but there is no pressure to obviously participate in a study, but.
And there's no pressure, and how would a patient know if it's safe to participate?
Right.
Well, every study that we are involved with has to go through an IRB, an institutional review board.
Okay.
And you can think of that as kind of a disinterested party or group of people who review the protocol. So for example, in the large drug studies, the companies that we work with develop the protocol. That protocol is then reviewed by an institutional review board, and they determine whether or not the protocol fits standards as far as safety, efficacy, exactly what is it that's going to be studied. So a patient who would like to participate in a study can feel comfortable that it has been approved by an IRB, an independent group of people. And then also it's important that all of the parameters of the protocol be reviewed with the patient before they participate. So what we do is email the protocol and the consent form to the patient, give them plenty of time to review it. We then have a phone call to discuss and talk about any questions or concerns they may have. And then we meet in person and review those same things again, because it's important that you hear it more than once in a different environment. And then if they decide that they do want to continue on, we'll sign the consent form. But all of our studies do go through an institutional review board.
Okay.
Yes.
What are some, are there any IVF studies coming up that, coming up in the horizon?
Right. Well, like Scott had mentioned earlier, there's a lot of ongoing studies. So there's a lot of opportunity for patients to participate in studies right now with the Aspire study, the pregnancy during time of COVID, the Cellmatics, the cradle genomics. But we do hope to be involved with the Bastion Health, which is the in-home kit where the men produce the samples at home and they go through them to analyze the studies, the sample. And then we're also hoping that Ferring Pharmaceuticals will be having, they're going to be having another large-scale study coming up, probably in about half a year.
Okay. And typically are patients, are participants compensated for the studies?
Most of the studies that we do offer some compensation for the patient's time and effort. It varies dependent upon the complexity of the study or the involvement. So for example, something like the Aspire study, which simply involves sending in a small drop of blood that they place onto a card. That is a compensated study, and it's rather well compensated. There are other studies, like the BioIncept study that we mentioned, where the material that is generally discarded was studied. So the patient actually didn't have any involvement there. So there wasn't compensation. So the compensation is commensurate with the involvement for the patient generally.
Okay.
And we generally do it sort of more for time and effort. So it's not that you're getting paid for donating your blood or some, or for the Cellmatic study, but it's usually in the form of a gift card, sort of a thank you for time and effort for the smaller, less involved studies.
Is this something, do all IVF fertility practices do research?
No, they don't. I mean, that's one of the really nice things about CARS is that we're able to really have a whole research department and be involved in multiple studies. So I think that's a real advantage to CARS. We do have the academic affiliation with UConn, which allows us to have fellows research. And some of the MDs also do research through UConn in collaboration with UConn. So that is a real sets us apart.
Yeah.
I would say as well, not all IVF clinics have a research department, nor do they have always the staff that could provide the care and do the research. So we're very lucky here that the nursing team, the physicians, the financial team, the front desk, we have a full range of people who have been trained and participate in the studies, as well as equipment like a -80 freezer, which not everybody has. So there's a lot of infrastructure that's necessary to participate in the studies.
Are there any notable studies that you can think of, or studies that are notable in so far as what it's provided or how it's helped us going forward?
I think from a standpoint of helping patients, the one that really comes to mind is the RITA study.
Yeah.
And the RITA study was looking at a new gonadotropin, a new medication, and that provided a lot of patients who would not have been able to go through an IVF cycle to participate, because in that particular study, the compensation was an IVF cycle. But the patients had to do a lot of work to participate. So that's where I was saying that the benefit is generally commensurate with the amount of work that needs to be put into it. So I think the RITA study was a big help for our patients, and it had a great pregnancy outcome.
Awesome.
But in general, I do feel like almost every study moves the field forward a little bit. So any participation, even if it's on what you kind of individually refer sort of as low level, is still moving the field forward and helping patients who are seeking infertility treatment after you. So I think that's really sort of important to keep in mind. One of the components is that it's a way to give back after having gone through it yourself. So I think that is a real feel-good feeling.
And going back to one of your original questions, Ami, about do the patients know the results often? A lot of times this is very altruistic for our patients, that they feel that they're helping the next generation or the other women. So rather than getting a direct benefit or an immediate benefit for themselves, they look at it from a standpoint, if I participate in the Aspire study, or if I participate in the BioIncept study, it may not help me immediately, but it is going to help the field and other women.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's amazing. It wouldn't happen without without you guys in the research department. So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing this today. So, is there anything else that you want to talk about that I haven't covered or we haven't covered?
No, I think that's it. I just want to thank the patients who have participated in the study. Everyone has been great that we've worked with. So thank you to anyone who has participated. And we look forward to working with other people as well.
Excellent.
Agreed. Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
I think, the patients who do these research studies or who participate, they are really helping the next generation, if you will, of fertility treatment patients and helping them, giving back, if you will. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, well, that's all for today. So be sure to visit our website at yukonfertility.com for more information and a calendar of events to support your fertility journey. See you next time.